to the fourth part of the AR Basecamp challenge. So we've got pretty far. We've looked at variable types. So you define a variable by using the keyword var, then you give it a name, and then you give it a type. This is a variable of type string, and inside of our variable str, which is named str of type string, we put the words hello playground, and a string is a collection of characters. And then the second type of a variable is an integer or a whole number, and here we have a variable called number of type int, which we assign the value 10. So the number variable holds the value 10, and we proved that by printing these out to the screen. And then we looked at functions. We declared a function by using the word func. We called it print a string, and then we gave it two parameters. The first parameter is called a string of type string. The second parameter is called number of times of type int. And this function returns, by using this arrow, a string. Inside of our function, we print a string, the parameter a string, and then we use number of times to perform a loop n number of times. And so we set up a for loop, which is what we did in the last video. We used the keyword for, then we used the placeholder n to hold the value of the number in the loop, and then in indicates what we're going to loop around. We're going to loop around from 0 to ... number of times. So we're going to loop around from 0 to 10, for example. And then what we want to happen on this loop, the piece of code that we want to repeat 10 times, is just simply to print out the value of this placeholder to demonstrate what the for loop does. And then the very last thing, because we are returning something from this function, is to return something from this function, and we simply return a string plus hello. And then after this function, which is indicated by this closing bracket, opening and closing brackets are very important to remember. We then created a variable called return result. We called our function, we passed in the value, we passed in these two parameters. The first parameter had the value hello world, the second parameter had the value 10, and then we basically printed out this variable that we just defined before. So whatever gets returned from this, which is this, gets stored into return result, and then we print out onto the screen, and we can see all of that happens in the console below. So the last thing that I need to show you so that you can complete this challenge is basically how to do a local variable and then return that, or how to solve the challenge really. So in this challenge on this website, they want you to complete the function. And the function is called repeat string, and it will loop around n number of times and then print that string out onto the screen. So the first thing that we need to do inside of our function is to create what's called a local variable, and we can do that by writing var, and the variable is going to be called long string, and then we're going to give it an initial value of empty, nothing. And what we're going to use this local variable long string for is to store the result of the number of times we need to print the string onto the screen. And just to explain a little bit about what local variable scope means, this variable here is only known about inside of this function, so inside of these squiggly brackets. Outside of that function, the computer program doesn't know anything about this variable long string. It's just a variable that we want to use inside of this function. So inside of our loop now, what we're going to do is we're going to write long string, and then I'm going to assign long string with a string, our parameter, plus long string. So On the first loop, long string is empty, but after we've assigned long string this value on the first loop, long string will take on the value of whatever a string was. On the second loop, a long string will take on its previous value, which would be this, plus the value of the string parameter that we passed in. So you can see that however many times we loop around that loop, we will keep adding on that string. And then the very last thing we need to do once we've looped around n number of times is, instead of passing back a string plus hello, because that was just to test out what return statements do, we're going to pass back long string. And then if you can see here below now, the computer has called this function, it has looped it 10 times, it's added long string on, and then it's returned it. Let's print long string in the loop just to see what's actually going on. And you can see here a more visual depiction of what's happening. On the first loop, there's nothing. On the second loop, there's one hello world. On the third loop, there's two hello worlds. On the fourth loop, there's three, and so on and so on and so on, until we get to until n is the n number of times, until we've got to the number 10, and then we've got this, and then the for loop finishes and it returns this value long string. It returns our local variable long string, which we're using to store all the hello worlds, and it returns it here and then prints it onto the screen. I could change this. I could change this to Ben, and you get a nice pyramid of Bens there. So play around with that code, and I hope you understand it. This is basically the solution to this challenge, which I will go through. If you have absolutely no idea and you really want to know the solution and you can't work it out on your own, although I'm sure you can, I will go through this challenge in the next video. So good luck with the challenge. You have the solution. I've explained all the concepts. I hope you understand it. I hope you play around with it, and I hope you come and join us on the course.